AskReddit. Redditors who have killed someone in self-defense. How did you handle the aftermath of what you did? I was woken up by my fiancée telling me that she thinks someone opened the back door, which is always locked. It was a loud ass door with an even louder screen door that I've never heard anything else sound like. So I told her to lay on the floor and call 911 as I grabbed my handgun from the nightstand. As she was whispering to the operator, I could hear at least one person talking downstairs. It turned out that there were two people. I could hear footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. My fiancée set the phone down and I told her to cover her ears. The bedroom door opened and a man was standing in the doorway with something in his hands. I later found out it was a knife. I fired 4 shots. 2 hit the man in the doorway in the chest, 1 hit the second person who was standing near the top of the stairs in the shoulder, and the 4th shattered my toilet down the hall. The police showed up soon after that. The rest of the night was mostly a blur. The guy in the doorway died there. The one I shot in the shoulder lived and was charged with his burglar buddy's death and a host of other charges. I also remember slipping on the stairs because of the water. I was never blamed for anything. I was asked to go to the station that night to talk to them for a while, but I was able to go with my fiancée and not in the back of a cop car. The 911 recording backed up my whole story. I was traveling down 277 just south of Del Rio, Texas, no more than 5 miles from the US-Mexico border. Me in all my infinite wisdom stopped to take a leak on the side of the road. As I was zipping up, I got hit over the back of the head. Apparently it was some sort of initiation deal and it was this 17 or 18-year-old kid that hit me. He didn't put enough oats into it and it just dazed me and knocked me to the ground. 2 of them started to get into my truck and 1 started to go through my pockets. I hit him with my elbow and then rolled over on top of him and found a rock about the size of a softball. I hit him in the head with it until he quit struggling. 1 of the others jumped out of the truck to come help his buddy. I threw my rock at him and rushed my driver door. I got my hand on my revolver, shot at the guy who I threw the rock at, then leveled the pistol at the guy who was sitting in my passenger seat and told him to stay there with his hands on the dash. While I was trying to find my phone, a border patrol unit showed up, and then another and another. When it was all said and done, I got off with no charge because the border patrol watched it all go down on camera. I had to go back into Del Rio and go to the hospital because I was concussed. The guy I beat with a rock died before the ambulance got there. The guy I shot bled out on the way to the hospital and the 3rd guy was held and then deported. Moral of the story: don't stop to take a leak in a bar ditch 5 miles from the border at 1 AM. I used to live in a particularly bad neighborhood when I was 13ish. It was around midnight when I heard our front door open. My mom worked nights, and my dad was overseas, so I assumed either my mom got sent home early, or we were getting burglarized. We didn't have any guns in the house, or really anything someone could defend themselves with, so I hid in the closets in my room. After a few minutes I heard someone open the door to my room and start rummaging through drawers and such. I didn't really have anything of value, and there wasn't really anything in the house other than a really old TV that weighed upwards of 150 pounds. After throwing all the contents of my drawers onto the floor, I thought he'd be done and just leave, but I was wrong. Something about the closet called to him, I guess, and he came over and put a hand on the doorknob. I couldn't really think of anything else to do, so I looked around for the most viable self-defense weapon I could find. The best I found was a clay bowl I'd made when in school a few years prior. When the door opened, I swung it as hard as I could. The impact was enough to daze him and shatter my shoddy bowl, but nothing else. I picked up one of the shards of the bowl and tried to use it as a sort of makeshift knife. He started backing away and tripped over something on the floor. I tried to jump on him and hold him down, but I was a scrawny kid, so it didn't really do much. He kept punching me, and in a moment of fear and adrenaline-fueled anger, I stabbed him with a shard of the bowl. I wasn't trying to kill him, but I punctured a vital artery or something, and he ended up bleeding out while I was on the phone with 911. The police took me to the station and asked a few questions, then called my mom to let her know what happened. They did want to try me for voluntary manslaughter, but dropped the charges soon after for reasons that were never disclosed to me. It really messed with my mental health. and because it was on the news and published in the local newspaper, and it ruined my social life for the next 5 years, but I've accepted it as part of my life and moved on. I've posted this before in another thread, so apologies if it sounds familiar. I'd been kickboxing competitively for 10 years prior to this incident. I had broken my arm and had a newborn child. I had one arm in a sling and my baby in a carrier that was in my other hand. A guy must have thought I looked like an easy target and pulled a knife on me while I was walking through a relatively quiet alley connecting 2 streets. My only thoughts were of my baby, so I kicked the guy in the thigh hard. He fell over and I followed up with a roundhouse to the side of his head. Only issue was that he had fallen next to a bollard, and when I kicked him his head smashed off it. I don't think I'll ever forget the noise his head made when it hit off the bollard, and I'll never forget it. I was charged with manslaughter, but the charges were ultimately dropped due to the fact I had my child. The attacker was armed and I had no prior convictions. I still feel absolutely dreadful about what happened, and if I could go back and change it I would. But what's done is done. I'll never forget it. This is really late, but oh well. I was staying at my parents' house alone one night because they were on vacation. I had just moved back in with them because I had just gone into recovery for alcoholism. I always hated staying in their house at night alone because there are a million windows. It's a large house, and there are 6 different doors to the outside on ground level, the main door being mostly glass. I usually sleep with earplugs, and because I'm a light sleeper with really decent hearing. But I didn't this night for some reason. I was having trouble falling asleep, and sometime in the night I heard a noise downstairs, and I walked to my bedroom door, which was directly at the top of the stairs, and peered out. We live on a lake, and luckily a carp spearing boat drove past. They drive close to shore with huge headlights that could blind a person. But in this case it just lit up the downstairs enough that I could see the large silhouette of a man who had something in his hand. I had brought up a knife from the kitchen and put it on my nightstand because I was terrified of my parents' house at night, but for some reason in that moment I had completely forgotten about it, and grabbed one of the 40-pound dumbbells in my room and went out to the stairs and threw it at him as he made his way up. He made this horrible sound and fell backwards. I went back and grabbed another and threw that down at him, too. I don't really remember anything else. I'm not even really sure how I threw 2 40-pound dumbbells at him. I was struggling to deadlift earlier that day so hard and such a long distance. Apparently the second dumbbell hit him in the skull and killed him. I was taken to the police station but was released almost immediately because he had duct tape on his person and the gun he was carrying had only 1 bullet in the chamber. They believe he had probably been stalking me and waiting for me to be alone for a night. I have PTSD from this, which is why I created a new account for this story. I don't want people looking at my comment history and bringing it up. A man had intent to bound, rape, and execute me. I killed 2 people. Work the night shift, so I normally get home around 1:30 am, and most times my mother is asleep. This time however I could see the living room lights were on and 2 big shadows were moving around in my house. This was extremely out of the ordinary, so I unclipped my Smith & Wesson SD9 from my holster and slowly peeked in through a window. There were 2 guys in their mid-40s in my living room throwing things around and rummaging trough drawers. One man had a handgun, and I figured I could wait and call the police from outside the house and keep an eye on them to make sure they don't head for the bedrooms on the 2nd floor. However, when I glanced to the couch I saw my mother huddled with my 12-year-old niece who must have been spending the night. I knew if I waited for the cops this could go south before they got there. I was able to signal my mother to cover my niece's eyes and ears. I waited till the 2 men were on the far side of the room. I turned the doorknob and burst into the house with my weapon pointed at the man with the pistol. I told him in a surprisingly commanding voice to drop his weapon. Then it happened. It felt like slow motion. I saw his arm start to flick upward and I fired 3 rounds into center mass. The second man reached behind his back and I had no choice but to put 4 rounds into him. What I can tell you is it's not like the movies where a person dies instantly. In real life people gurgle, cry, asks for family members, ask you why you did it, and so on. Finally, one I can answer. Unfortunately, this is my boyfriend's story. He was stationed in NC and met a girl online. He went to her house to pick her up for a date. She told him she was almost ready and to sit on the couch. Well, out comes her boyfriend with a shotgun pointed right at my boyfriend. Now, my boyfriend is a fucking Marine. He's carrying. In a split second, he pulls his Glock and shoots this guy, killing him. He has his gun pointed at the girl now, waiting on police. He didn't have a concealed carry license at the time, but the police looked past that. No charges. 8-10 years old, someone decided it would be smart to break into our house. This was before dad had divorced. Dad had always taught us shotgun safety and how to use one in the event of a home invasion. Raise the gun to your hip, aim in the general direction of who you want to shoot, then fire. Simple. Well, as stated, someone thought it would be smart to break into our house via my room window. Made no sense. The window was a good 6 feet off the ground. The window on the other side of the house, by the kitchen, was ground level and would have made a better choice. Anyhow, I remember the guy almost falling down off the window once he got a leg inside. I knew we had an alarm and wondered why it didn't go off by this time. I was already silently reaching under the bed for my shotgun. Dad made each of us, 3 total, keep one under our bed just in case. Not an adult sized one. A smaller one, but still very capable of doing a lot of damage. But at the same time wondering if it was my dad since the alarm hadn't gone off. As I think about this, the alarm goes off, something clicks in my mind. The guy falls off the window when the alarm goes off. Instinct kicked in, raised the gun, pulled the trigger twice, then ran to my parents' room. I never saw the mess I created. The cops and crime scene unit guys were there all night and well into the morning. Afternoon, the cleanup guys came after the cops were done. We sold the house shortly after that. We lived in an affluent neighborhood. Hardly any crimes. Rarely any cops rolling around. Usually the only emergency vehicles we saw were ambulances, fire trucks,